My name is Valentina, and at 34 years old, I was bleeding alone in the emergency room when I made the phone call that would cost my father $15 million. The sterile smell of disinfectant mixed with my fear as I clutched my stomach, praying for a miracle that wouldn't come. When I finally reached him, his response arrived as a text: "I'm at lunch. Can't leave. Have Margaret handle it." Little did he know that dismissive message would trigger the biggest financial loss of his life. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from, and please hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible to someone who should care about you most. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally are the ones who teach us the hardest lessons about our worth. Growing up as Richard Sterling's daughter meant living in a golden cage in Manhattan's Upper East Side. My father built his real estate empire from nothing, turning a small loan from my grandmother into a billion-dollar portfolio of luxury properties across 3 continents. Everyone knew the Sterling name. We lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, had drivers, housekeepers, and assistants for everything imaginable. But what we didn't have was him. My mother Eleanor died when I was 12. Pancreatic cancer took her in 6 months, though my father missed most of those months, closing deals in Dubai and Tokyo. I remember sitting beside her hospital bed holding her frail hand while she waited for him to call. He managed to make it to her funeral, but I watched him step outside during the eulogy to take a call about a property in Singapore. 3 months later, he married Margaret, a 28-year-old former model who cared more about her Botox appointments than her new stepdaughter. The pattern started early and never changed. My 13th birthday, he sent his assistant Caroline with a credit card and an apology. My high school graduation, his seat remained empty while he negotiated a merger in London. When I got accepted to Columbia, he texted congratulations from his jet. My college graduation, he promised to attend but never showed. Caroline was there, of course, with flowers and another apology. I learnt to stop expecting him. I built my own life, became a pediatric physical therapist, found purpose in helping children recover from injuries and surgeries. It felt like redemption being present for kids when their bodies needed healing, showing up in ways my father never did. I met Marcus at a charity event when I was 29. He was different from the Wall Street types I usually encountered, an investment banker, yes, but one who actually looked me in the eyes when I spoke, who remembered details about my work, who showed up. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony in the Hamptons. Father arrived late, left early for a conference call with Beijing investors, but at least he walked me down the aisle. That was more than I expected. Margaret spent the reception complaining about the wine selection and telling anyone who would listen about their new yacht. I stopped being hurt by then, or at least I told myself I had. When I found out I was pregnant at 34, something shifted in me. Maybe it was hormones, maybe it was hope, but I started believing things could change. A grandchild might soften him, might make him realize what he'd been missing. I started sending him ultrasound photos, updates about the baby's development. He responded occasionally, usually brief texts between meetings. Still, it felt like progress. Marcus was thrilled about the pregnancy. Unlike my father, he rearranged meetings for doctor appointments, read pregnancy books on flights, talked to my belly every night before bed. But the investment world doesn't pause for anyone, and when his firm needed someone in London for a critical deal, he had to go. It was supposed to be 3 days, just enough time to finalize contracts and return before my 15-week checkup. The morning it happened, I woke to cramping unlike anything I'd experienced before. It started low and deep, radiating through my back and down my legs. When I stood, I felt the warmth spreading down my thighs and saw the blood, too much blood. My hands shook as I called Marcus, but London was 5 hours ahead and he was in meetings. I left a voicemail trying to keep my voice steady, then called an ambulance. But as I waited, doubled over in pain, I realized I didn't want to go through this alone. I called my father. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. His recorded voice, confident and dismissive, telling callers he was building an empire and would return calls at his convenience. I hung up and dialed again. This time he answered on the 5th ring, his voice impatient and distracted. "Valentina, this better be important. I'm in the middle of lunch with the Yamamoto group. Dad, I'm going to the hospital. Something's wrong with the baby. There's so much blood and Marcus is in London and I need..." Slow down. What hospital? Mount Sinai. Dad, I'm scared. Can you come? Please. I heard him sigh, heard chopsticks clicking against porcelain, heard him speak in muffled tones to someone at his table. When he came back, his voice was harder, more annoyed. "Valentina, I'm closing the biggest deal of my career right now, the Tokyo project. We're talking about $2 billion in development. I can't just leave. Dad, I'm losing the baby. I'm alone and I'm losing. Call Margaret. She can handle this. I'll check in later. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, blood pooling on the bathroom floor, and felt something inside me break that had nothing to do with my body. A minute later, a text arrived. I'm at lunch. Can't leave. Have Margaret handle it. I drove myself to the emergency room, towels stuffed between my legs, tears blurring my vision. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every bump in the road sent fresh waves of pain through my abdomen. By the time I reached Mount Sinai, I could barely walk. The emergency room smelled like fear and antiseptic, a combination that would forever remind me of the worst day of my life. The triage nurse took one look at me, at the blood soaking through my dress, and immediately wheeled me back. No waiting, no forms, just urgent movements and concerned faces. The examination room was cold, sterile white walls and fluorescent lights that made everything look harsh and unforgiving. Dr. Reyes, a woman about my mother's age, would have been held my hand as she prepared the ultrasound. Her face told me everything before she said the words. I'm so sorry, Valentina. There's no heartbeat. I nodded, unable to speak. Somewhere deep inside, I'd known the moment the cramping started, but hearing it confirmed felt like drowning. She explained about the D&C procedure, the risks, the timeline, but her words floated past me like smoke. I was alone, completely alone, losing my baby while my father ate sushi with investors. I tried calling him again. This time it went straight to voicemail. I texted, my fingers slippery with tears. Lost the baby. Having surgery. Alone. No response. I called Margaret next, desperate enough to reach out to a woman who'd never shown me an ounce of maternal concern. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright and false. Valentina, darling, your father mentioned you called. I'm at the spa getting my monthly renewal. You know how important maintenance is at my age. I'm having a miscarriage, Margaret. I need someone here. Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Can't you call an Uber home afterward? I'm already undressed for my massage. She hung up. I sat on the examination table, legs dangling like a child's, and felt the full weight of my abandonment. This was my family. These were the people who were supposed to care. A nurse entered, an older black woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. Her name tag read Betty, and she moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen too much pain. She took one look at my face, at my phone clutched in my bloody hands, and understood. Where's your family, honey? They're busy. She made a sound in her throat, something between sympathy and disgust, and pulled a chair close to the bed. Well, I'm not busy. My shift ends in an hour, but I'm not going anywhere until you're through this. You don't have to. Yes, I do. No woman should go through this alone. Not ever. Betty held my hand through the preparation, through the anesthesia, through the last moments before everything went dark. When I woke up groggy and empty, she was still there, reading a paperback novel in the recovery room's dim light. The procedure was successful, Dr. Reyes told me. My body would heal in a few weeks. She didn't mention my heart, how long that would take, to stop feeling like someone had reached inside and torn it apart. As I lay in recovery, Betty brought me juice and crackers, small comforts that felt monumental in my state. My phone buzzed with messages. 3 from my father's assistant, Caroline, asking which car service I preferred for the ride home. 1 from Margaret, saying she hoped everything worked out and reminding me about their dinner party next week. Nothing from my father himself. Marcus called as I was getting dressed, to leave his voice frantic and broken. I told him everything from the first cramp to my father's text, and I could hear him pacing, probably destroying some poor hotel room in his helplessness. I'm getting on the next flight. 6 hours and I'll be there. It's okay. It's over now. No, it's not okay. He chose lunch, Val. Lunch over his daughter losing a baby. That's not okay. Betty helped me to the lobby, insisted on waiting until Marcus's friend arrived to drive me home. Before she left, she pressed a card into my hand with her personal number. You call if you need anything. And honey, I've been a nurse for 30 years. I've seen all kinds of families. Blood doesn't make family. Showing up does. Remember that. As I rode home through Manhattan traffic, watching normal people living their normal lives, I felt my phone buzz. A text from my father, hope, everything worked out. Closed the Tokyo deal, $60 million in profit. We'll make it up to you. I turned off my phone and let the numbness wash over me. But in my purse, pressed against my wallet, was an envelope I'd been carrying for 6 months, afraid to open. My grandmother Rose, my father's mother, had died just after my birthday. She'd left me a letter, but I'd been too consumed with trying to get pregnant to face another loss. Now sitting in the back of a stranger's car, bleeding and broken, I carefully opened the seal. My dearest Valentina, the letter began in my grandmother's careful script. If you're reading this, I'm gone, but my love for you remains. There are things about your father I should have told you long ago, patterns I should have helped you see. Richard learned early that money could replace presence, that success could substitute for love. I blame myself for not stopping it sooner, but I want you to know that I've taken steps to protect you. Jerome Whitman, my attorney, has something important to tell you. Don't let your father intercept this like he has my other attempts to reach you. Yes, dear one, I've been trying. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone. He returns my letters, blocks my calls, says you're too busy. But I know better. You are loved, Valentina. You are valuable beyond measure, not for what you do or what you achieve, but for who you are. I've made sure that one day the universe will balance the scales. When you're ready, call Jerome. The number is below. All my love, Grandma Rose. I read the letter 3 times, each word a revelation. My father had been keeping us apart, stealing even this relationship from me. With shaking fingers, I dialed the number. Jerome Whitman's office occupied the 40th floor of a building overlooking Bryant Park, all leather and mahogany and quiet authority. I arrived the next morning, Marcus beside me, despite my insistence that I could handle it alone. He'd flown through the night, taken one look at my face, and declared he wasn't leaving my side for anything. Jerome was in his 70s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He stood when we entered, came around his massive desk to take my hands in both of his. Valentina, I'm so sorry for your loss. Both of them. Your grandmother spoke of you constantly. She was very proud of the woman you've become. He guided us to leather chairs, poured water from a crystal pitcher, then returned to his desk and pulled out a thick folder marked with my name. Your grandmother updated her will 6 months before she passed. She was quite specific about the distribution of her estate, and even more specific about the conditions attached. You were supposed to be notified immediately upon her death, but your father intercepted my attempts to contact you. How much are we talking about? Marcus asked his banker, instincts surfacing despite everything. The estate is valued at approximately $50 million. Your grandmother was a shrewd investor, turned her divorce settlement from your grandfather into quite a fortune through real estate and technology stocks. I nearly dropped my water glass. I knew Grandma Rose was comfortable, but $50 million was beyond my comprehension. The estate was to be divided into several portions. Jerome continued adjusting his glasses. Your father was set to receive $15 million on his 65th birthday, which is in 3 weeks. You were to receive $20 million in trust accessible at 35. The remaining $15 million was designated for various charities. However, there's a clause your grandmother insisted upon. She called it the family care provision. He pulled out a document pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. Any beneficiary who abandons, neglects, or fails to provide support to a family member during a medical emergency or crisis forfeits their entire portion of the inheritance. That portion is then redistributed to the affected family member and designated charities supporting families in crisis. My heart stopped. Are you saying? I'm saying that your father's text message, his refusal to leave a business lunch while you were experiencing a medical emergency, constitutes a clear violation of this clause. Your grandmother seemed to anticipate something like this might happen. She even specified that written communication, refusing to provide support, would be considered irrefutable evidence. I thought about all the times my father had chosen deals over daughters' meetings over memories. Grandma Rose had seen it all, had watched her son become someone she didn't recognize, and she'd planned for this moment. What do I need to do? We need documentation, medical records from yesterday, any communication between you and your father, witness statements if possible. The nurse who stayed with you, for instance. Betty. Her name was Betty. Excellent. With proper documentation, we can invoke the clause before your father's birthday. His $15 million would be split between you and a charity of your choosing that supports women experiencing pregnancy loss. Marcus squeezed my hand. His investment with the Yamamoto Group, the one he closed yesterday. How much was his commission? Jerome checked another document. Based on public filings, approximately $3 million. So he chose $3 million over his daughter, Marcus said quietly. And it's going to cost him $15 million. There's poetry in that. Jerome opened another drawer, pulled out a box I recognized. It was painted with roses, something I'd made in elementary school for Grandma Rose during one of our rare visits. Inside were stacks of letters, birthday cards, Christmas cards, all addressed to me, all marked return to sender in my father's handwriting. She never stopped trying to reach you, Jerome said gently. Every birthday, every holiday she wrote. Your father sent them all back, told her you didn't want contact. She knew he was lying, but she couldn't prove it. That's part of why she structured the will this way. She wanted to ensure that his true nature would be revealed. I picked up a birthday card from my 16th birthday, the day my father had been in Switzerland. Inside, Grandma Rose had written about how proud she was, how she wished she could see me becoming a young woman, how she loved me beyond words. 16 years of stolen love hidden away in a painted box. There's more, Jerome said. Security footage from her building shows your father visiting her the day before she died. The doorman reported hearing raised voices. She changed her will that very evening, adding the clause, "I think she knew her time was running short and wanted to protect you however she could. I need those medical records," I said, my voice steadier than I'd felt in days. "And I need Betty's statement." "Can we move forward immediately?" Jerome smiled, the expression both sad and satisfied. "Your grandmother would be so proud." "Yes, we can file the paperwork today. Your father will be notified within 48 hours. As we left Jerome's office, Marcus wrapped his arm around me. "You know he's going to fight this. Let him try. For once in his life, he's going to face consequences for his choices." 3 days later, my father called 17 times in 1 hour. I didn't answer once. Instead, I sat with Betty in a coffee shop near the hospital, getting her sworn statement notarized. She'd brought 2 other nurses who'd witnessed my arrival, seen me alone, and bleeding heard me crying for my father. They were all happy to help. "You're doing the right thing, honey," Betty said, signing her name with a flourish. "That man needs to learn that some things matter more than money." The irony is that's exactly what he's about to learn. It's just going to cost him $15 million to figure it out. My father's office occupied the top floor of Sterling Tower, a monument to his ego wrapped in glass and steel. I hadn't been there in 2 years, had stopped trying to visit, when Caroline started scheduling me in 30-minute slots between meetings. But when I told her it was about Grandma Rose's will, she cleared his entire afternoon. I arrived at 2 o'clock sharp, Marcus beside me, despite my father's insistence that this was a family matter. Family, I'd told Caroline, shows up when you need them. Marcus had shown up. He was family. The office hadn't changed, all sharp angles and cold surfaces, no photos except one of him shaking hands with the mayor. Margaret was already there, perched on a leather sofa in a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, scrolling through her phone with perfectly manicured nails. My father stood behind his desk, the power position he always chose for difficult conversations. At 64, he was still handsome in that polished way money provides silver hair, perfectly styled custom suit, impeccable. But I noticed new lines around his eyes, a tightness in his jaw that suggested he knew this wasn't going to go his way. "Valentina," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Caroline says this is about Mother's will. I've already spoken with her attorneys. Everything is in order. I don't appreciate you trying to interfere with—" "I'm not interfering," I interrupted, taking a seat without being invited. "I'm executing a clause in the will, the family care provision." His face went still. "That's ridiculous. There's no such—" Jerome Whitman entered the office right on cue, briefcase in hand, accompanied by a court officer. The timing was perfect theatrical, in a way my grandmother would have appreciated. Jerome nodded to me, then placed a thick folder on my father's desk. "Mr. Sterling, I'm here to formally notify you that the family care provision in Rose Sterling's will has been invoked. Due to your documented abandonment of your daughter during a medical emergency, specifically her miscarriage 3 days ago, you have forfeited your $15 million inheritance." Margaret's phone clattered to the floor. "What do you mean, forfeited? That's our money." My father's face cycled through emotions I'd never seen him display. Shock, rage, disbelief, and finally cold calculation. He sat slowly, fingers steepled, studying me like I was a problem to be solved. "You can't be serious. I had a business lunch, a $2 billion development deal. You had a daughter having a miscarriage," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "She called you from the emergency room begging for support, and you texted back that you couldn't leave lunch." Jerome opened the folder, spreading out documents like tarot cards predicting my father's future. "We have the medical records showing Valentina arrived at Mount Sinai emergency room at 11:47 a.m. experiencing a miscarriage. We have phone records showing she called you at 11:52 and 12:15. We have your text message at 12:18 stating, and I quote, 'I'm at lunch. Can't leave.' Have Margaret handle it. That doesn't prove—" We also have sworn statements from 3 nurses who attended to Valentina, all confirming she was alone in distress and repeatedly tried to reach family members. We have Mrs. Sterling's phone records showing she refused to leave her spa appointment, and we have security footage from the hospital showing Valentina arriving alone, covered in blood, barely able to walk. Margaret stood, her voice shrill. This is entrapment. You planned this. No one plans a miscarriage, Margaret, I said quietly, though apparently some people plan to be elsewhere when they happen. My father leaned forward, his voice dropping to the tone he used for hostile takeovers. What do you want? Money. You want me to buy you out? $5 million to make this go away. I don't want your money, Dad. I never did. I wanted you. I wanted a father who would leave a lunch, leave a meeting, leave anything when his daughter needed him. But you've made it clear that everything else comes first. This is about revenge, he spat. You're bitter about your childhood, about my success. Jerome interrupted, his voice carrying legal authority. This is about executing the clear wishes of Rose Sterling. She anticipated that family members might prioritize financial gain over family obligations. The clause is ironclad, Mr. Sterling. I helped write it myself. I'll contest it. I'll tie this up in court for years. You're welcome to try. But the clause specifically states that contesting it results in immediate forfeiture. Your mother thought of everything. My father stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked his empire. From here you could see half of Manhattan, all the buildings he'd developed, all the deals he'd closed. I wondered if he'd ever looked down and thought about what he'd missed while building it all. Your grandmother poisoned you against me, he said without turning around. Filled your head with sentimental garbage about family and showing up. I built this empire for our family. Every deal, every late night, every sacrifice was for us. Marcus spoke for the first time. With respect, Mr. Sterling, you built this empire for yourself. Valentina didn't need an empire. She needed a father. You don't understand business, my father said dismissively. Sometimes you have to make hard choices. That lunch with Yamamoto was worth $60 million in immediate profit and a $2 billion development deal. And it cost you $15 million in inheritance and your daughter, I said, standing to leave. I hope the math works out for you. Margaret grabbed my arm as I passed. You can't do this. We have plans for that money. The house in the Hamptons, the yacht upgrade, I shook her off. Then I suggest you upgrade your husband. This one's defective. As Jerome and I reached the door, my father's voice stopped us. You'll regret this, Valentina. When you need help, when you need connections, when you need the Sterling name to open doors, remember that you chose this. I turned back one last time. No, Dad. You chose this. You chose lunch. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom glittered with 500 of New York's elite, all gathered to celebrate Richard Sterling's 65th birthday. My father had refused to cancel the party despite losing his inheritance 3 days earlier, his pride demanding he maintain appearances. Marcus and I weren't invited, of course, but Jerome had arranged for us to attend as his guests. I watched from across the room as my father worked the crowd, his smile never wavering, his handshake. Firm his laugh carrying over the orchestra's music. To anyone watching, he was still the king of New York real estate, still the man with the Midas touch. Margaret clung to his arm in a gold dress that screamed desperation, her smile brittle as she ear-kissed women who were already whispering about the inheritance scandal. The Wall Street Journal had broken the story that morning, though they only had pieces. Prominent developer loses inheritance due to family clause. The headline read, careful to avoid legal troubles, but clear enough that everyone knew. My father's phone had probably been ringing all day with investors asking questions, partners reconsidering deals, banks re-evaluating credit lines. At precisely 9 o'clock, my father took the stage for the traditional birthday toast. He tapped the microphone, waiting for silence, his confidence still intact despite everything. I wondered how long that would last. Thank you all for joining me tonight, he began, his voice carrying that familiar authority. 65 years young and still building the future of this great city. As many of you know, my mother Rose passed 6 months ago, and today would have been the day I received my inheritance from her estate. The room buzzed with anticipation. Everyone knew something had happened, but no one knew exactly what. My father was about to spin it to control the narrative like he controlled everything else, or so he thought. Jerome stood up from our table near the back, his voice cutting through the murmur. Actually, Mr. Sterling, I believe there's been a development regarding that inheritance. My father's face froze as Jerome walked toward the stage, briefcase in hand. The crowd parted, sensing drama, hungry for scandal that didn't involve them. Jerome climbed the steps deliberately, each footfall echoing in the sudden silence. Ladies and gentlemen, Jerome announced, taking the microphone with practiced ease. I apologize for the interruption, but as Rose Sterling's executor, I have a legal obligation to make certain announcements public. 3 days ago, the family care provision in Mrs. Sterling's will was invoked. Due to Mr. Sterling's documented abandonment of his daughter during a medical emergency, his $15 million inheritance has been forfeited and redirected. The gasps rippled through the ballroom like dominoes falling. Phones appeared recording everything. Margaret swayed on her heels, gripping a champagne glass so tight I thought it might shatter. "This is neither the time nor the place." My father started reaching for the microphone. On the contrary, Jerome continued sidestepping him smoothly. "Your mother specifically requested that if the clause was invoked, it be announced at a public gathering of no less than 100 people. She wanted transparency, Mr. Sterling. She wanted everyone to know that actions have consequences." Someone in the crowd called out, "What kind of medical emergency?" Jerome looked at me, asking silent permission. I nodded. Mr. Sterling chose to attend a business lunch rather than support his daughter through a miscarriage. He texted that he couldn't leave his meeting while she was alone in the emergency room losing her child. The silence that followed was deafening. 500 people stared at my father, seeing him. Perhaps for the first time, not as Richard Sterling the mogul, but as Richard Sterling, the man who abandoned his bleeding daughter for a deal. Margaret laughed high and hysterical. "This is insane." It was just a lunch. He couldn't have known. He knew I said standing up. My voice carried in the absolute quiet. I called him twice. I told him I was losing the baby. He said the Tokyo deal was more important. He said to call Margaret. She was at the spa and couldn't be bothered either. Every phone was now pointed at us, recording this moment for posterity and social media. My father stood frozen on the stage, his carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. The $15 million Jerome announced will be split between Valentina Sterling and a new foundation called Rose's Arms, supporting women experiencing pregnancy loss alone. Mr. Sterling is welcome to contest this decision, though doing so will result in his entire portion going directly to charity. A prominent banker near the front stood up, his voice carrying loudly. "Richard, is this true? Did you really choose a business lunch over your daughter's emergency?" My father straightened his tie, attempting to salvage his dignity. "Sometimes in business you have to make difficult choices. The Yamamoto deal was worth $2 billion. I finished for him. He's told everyone. $2 billion in potential development. My baby, my emergency, my pain was worth less than a potential profit." The exodus started slowly, then picked up speed. Business associates murmuring excuses, society wives pulling their husbands toward the exits, investors making calls to reevaluate their positions. Within 10 minutes, half the room had emptied. Margaret grabbed my father's arm. "Do something. Fix this." But there was nothing to fix. The damage was done. His reputation, built on decades of calculated relationships and strategic positioning, was crumbling. The Sterling name would survive, but Richard Sterling, the man, was finished in the circles that mattered to him most. As we left, I heard him calling my name. Not Dad or Father, but Richard Sterling, using his business voice, trying one last negotiation. I didn't turn around. Betty had been right. Family shows up. He'd made his choice about showing up long ago. 3 weeks later, Margaret filed for divorce. Without the inheritance, and with his reputation in tatters, my father was no longer worth the investment of her time. She took what she could in the settlement and disappeared to Miami with a hedge fund manager. My father moved from the penthouse to a smaller apartment, still wealthy by any measure, but diminished in the ways that mattered to him. The Rose's Arms Foundation launched with Betty on the advisory board and me as director. Within a month, we'd helped 50 women facing pregnancy loss alone, providing both financial support and emotional care. Nurses from Mount Sinai volunteered their time, creating a network of support that my grandmother would have loved. Marcus took a leave from his firm to help me build the foundation, using his financial expertise to maximize our impact. We turned $15 million into a movement, creating chapters in 10 cities within 6 months. Every woman who came to us received what I hadn't had that day in the emergency room. Someone who showed up, someone who stayed, someone who understood that losing a pregnancy wasn't just a medical event, but a profound loss that deserved witness and support. 6 months after the birthday party, my father appeared at the foundation office. I barely recognized him at first. His hair had gone completely grey, his suit was off the rack, and he carried himself differently, like someone who'd learnt to occupy less space. I was reviewing grant applications when Betty knocked on my door. "There's someone here to see you, honey. You want me to send him away?" I looked through the glass door at my father sitting in our waiting room, looking uncomfortable among the pregnancy loss pamphlets and photos of the women we'd helped. Part of me wanted to send him away to let him feel the abandonment I'd felt. But I wasn't him. Give me 5 minutes, then send him in. He entered my office hesitantly, so different from the man who'd commanded boardrooms and controlled negotiations. He sat when I gestured, his hands folded like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. "The foundation is doing good work," he said finally. "I've been reading about it. Grandma Rose would be proud." He flinched at her name. "I've been thinking about her lately. About a lot of things. The business is struggling. 3 major investors pulled out after the party and the Bangkok deal fell through. Margaret's divorce lawyer was thorough. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. And you shouldn't be. I deserve it. All of it." We sat in silence for a moment, the sound of phones ringing in the outer office, volunteers coordinating support for women who needed us. This was my empire now, built on showing up instead of showing off. "I came to say I was wrong," he continued, the words seeming to physically hurt him. "Not just about that day, but about everything. Your whole life I chose wrong. Your mother's death, your graduation, your wedding, and finally, unforgivably, the day you lost your child. I chose wrong every single time. Why?" The question I'd never asked directly, but had wondered my entire life. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I thought love was weakness. "My father, your grandfather, left when I was 7. Just walked out, started a new family, never looked back. I watched my mother struggle, watched her beg him to see me, watched her love destroy her. I promised myself I'd never be weak like that, never let feeling override logic. I built walls with dollars and called it success. But Grandma Rose rebuilt herself. She became strong. She did. And she tried to teach me that strength and love weren't opposites. But I was already too far gone, too committed to my version of power. By the time I realized what I'd become, what I'd lost, it was too late. "You were grown, your mother was gone, and I only knew how to speak in contracts and deals." He pulled out an envelope worn from handling. "I write letters now. To you, to your mother, to mine. This one's to the baby you lost. I know it's too late, but I needed to say goodbye to my grandchild, to apologize for not being there when they left us." I took the letter, feeling its weight. "Why are you really here, Dad?" "To tell you that you were right. Some things can't be brought back once they're lost. I lost you the day I chose lunch over your emergency, but really I'd been losing you since the day you were born, and I answered a call during your first cry. The inheritance doesn't matter. The money never mattered. I just didn't know it until it was gone." He stood to leave, older and smaller than the giant of my childhood memories. At the door, he turned back. "I know I have no right to ask, but are you pregnant again?" I placed my hand on my stomach, where at 5 months new life grew. "Yes." His face crumpled for just a moment before he composed himself. I hope this child has everything I never gave you. Love, presence, a family that shows up. They will. Marcus and I will make sure of it." He nodded and left. I never saw him again, though checks arrived monthly for the foundation, sometimes with notes about women he'd heard needed help. He died 3 years later alone in his apartment, his assistant Caroline finding him when he missed a meeting. She called me crying, saying he'd been looking at photos of me as a child when his heart stopped. In his will, he left everything to Rose's arms. It wasn't redemption, but it was acknowledgement. Marcus and I had 3 children, each one surrounded by chosen family by Betty, who became their honorary grandmother by the network of women from the foundation who understood that family wasn't about blood or obligation, but about presence and choice. We named our first daughter Rose after the grandmother who saw everything clearly and planned accordingly. Our son William, after no one in particular, free from the weight of legacy. Our youngest Eleanor after my mother, who died waiting for someone who never came. I told them all the story when they were old enough, about the grandfather who chose lunch over love, about the $15 million lesson, about how sometimes the universe balances scales in unexpected ways. But more importantly, I told them about Betty, who stayed past her shift, about Marcus, who flew through the night, about all the people who showed up when showing up was all that mattered. The foundation grew to help thousands of women, each one getting what I didn't have that terrible day. Someone to hold their hand, someone to witness their loss, someone to say their baby mattered, their pain mattered, they mattered. We expanded beyond pregnancy loss to support anyone abandoned in medical crisis, because Grandma Rose was right, that family failing to show up in emergencies was its own special kind of tragedy. I kept my father's letter to his never-born grandchild sealed for years, finally opening it on what would have been their 5th birthday. Inside his usually perfect handwriting was shaky, tear-stained. He wrote about regret, about choosing wrong, about the cost of pride. But the last line was what broke me. I would give every dollar I ever earned for one chance to hold your hand while you said goodbye to our baby. Some prices I learned can't be calculated in dollars. My father paid $15 million to learn that lesson, but the real cost was immeasurable, A lifetime of empty spaces where love should have been. Every time I hold my children, every time Marcus and I show up for each other, every time Betty calls just to check in, I think about how wealthy I really am. How Grandma Rose's true inheritance wasn't money, but the wisdom to know what actually matters. Today marks 10 years since I bled alone in that emergency room, 10 years since my father chose lunch over love, 10 years since Grandma Rose's plan revealed the truth about our family. The foundation has helped over 20,000 women, created support networks in 50 cities, changed laws in 12 states to guarantee paid leave for pregnancy loss. Betty, now 80, still serves on our board, still holds hands with women facing their darkest moments, still reminds them that family is about who shows up. Marcus never went back to investment banking full-time. He manages the foundation's finances, making sure every dollar stretches to help as many people as possible. Our children grow up attending support groups, understanding that grief and joy can coexist, that helping others heal helps us heal too. They know their grandfather's name, but not his legacy of absence. Instead, they carry forward Grandma Rose's legacy of strategic love, of protecting the vulnerable, of making sure consequences match choices. The Sterling Tower was sold last year to a developer who turned it into affordable housing and medical clinics. My father would have hated the irony, his monument to wealth becoming a place of healing for people he would have ignored. But I like to think Grandma Rose would have loved it, would have seen the poetry and transformation in buildings and people both. Sometimes young women come to the foundation, daughters of powerful men carrying their own stories of abandonment wrapped in success. I tell them what Betty told me, what Grandma Rose knew, what my father learned too late, that showing up is the only wealth that matters, that presence is the only gift that counts, that some things once lost can never be bought back. The $15 million my father lost became millions of moments of support, thousands of hands held, countless women told they matter more than any deal, any lunch, any empire built on absence. His loss became our gain, not in money, but in meaning. The family care provision, Grandma Rose's final strategic move, ensured that abandonment had a price tag my father finally understood. I think about forgiveness sometimes, whether I should have given him more grace, more chances. But then I remember that call from the emergency room, the text about lunch, the decades of choosing everything else first. Some patterns are too deep to change, some choices too consistent to excuse. My father got exactly what he chose: success without family wealth, without warmth, a legacy of absence that no amount of money could fill. But from his failure grew something beautiful. Rose's arm stands as proof that loss can become love, that abandonment can birth abundance, that sometimes the worst day of your life plants seeds for thousands of better days for others. Every woman who doesn't face her miscarriage alone, every family that stays together through crisis, every person who learns that showing up matters more than showing off, they're all part of Grandma Rose's plan, her way of ensuring that what happened to me stops with me. The last time I visited my grandmother's grave, I brought her a photo from our latest foundation gala, 500 women strong, all supporting each other, all pledging to show up. I told her about the laws we've changed, the families, we've helped the empire of empathy, we've built on the ruins of my father's empire of ego. I thanked her for seeing what would happen, for planning accordingly, for loving me enough to ensure consequences. As I left the cemetery, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Rose has a fever. Coming home now. Need anything? Just you, I texted back. Just showing up, because that's what family does. They leave lunches, meetings, opportunities, whatever it takes to be there when you need them. They choose love over logic, presence over profit, showing up over showing off. My father never learned that lesson in life, paying $15 million for an education that came too late. But his failure became my foundation, literally and figuratively, for building something better. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're not worth leaving lunch for, know this: their absence is not about your worth, it's about their values. And sometimes the universe has a way of showing people exactly what their choices really cost. My father chose a $2 billion deal over his daughter's emergency. It cost him $15 million and his family. The math is simple when you finally understand what counts. So to anyone watching who's been abandoned in their moment of need, who's been told that meetings matter more than miscarriages, that deals matter more than daughters, remember that you deserve someone who shows up. You deserve a Betty who stays past her shift, a Marcus who flies through the night, a chosen family who understands that presence is the only present that matters. And if you're someone who's been choosing lunch over love meetings, over moments, deals, over family, consider this your warning. The cost might not be $15 million, but I promise you it will be more than you can afford. Because some things once lost can never be bought back. My father learned that lesson too late. Through sharing this story, my hope is that you won't. I want to thank everyone who watched this story to the end. If you found any comfort or recognition in these words, please share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about a time someone showed up for you when it mattered most or when someone didn't, because those stories need to be told too. Like this video if you believe that showing up matters more than showing off, and subscribe. If you want to hear more stories about families, both blood and chosen, and the prices we pay for our choices. Remember that you are worthy of people who choose you, who show up for you, who understand that no lunch, no meeting, no deal is more important than being there when you need them most. Thank you for listening, and may you always have people in your life who know that presence is priceless.